It was quiet. Too quiet. Our breath came out in quick bursts. I glanced at my best friend, Sean. His hands jammed in his pockets of his brown leather coat. The coat was about 3 sizes too big and limply hung off his thin frame. His eyes met mine. He pushed his shaggy blonde hair out of his eyes and gave me a nod. We began to run against the chilly October air. Though I had a sweatshirt on and sweatpants, I was still freezing. It snowed yesterday, but seeped through the cracked soles of my shoes and numbing my feet. The sharp wind bit at my face, blowing my messy brown hair all over the place. It's not that it mattered much. My hair stuck up anyway. What time is it now? Sean inquired, his teeth chattering uncontrollably. I checked my watch. 9 a.m., I moaned. We're gonna have to hurry. We don't want to be late for our first day, said Sean, making a feeble attempt to run. He fell to the ground, his legs of his faded blue jeans frozen stiff. I offered my hand and helped him up. Chill out, I said, patting him on the back. He'll understand if we're late. Let's try to get there on time. All right, I said, nodding. My dad's work is only just down the street. We found out quickly it was easier said than done. The legs of our pants were frozen stiff with the cold, and we fell several times. We got to the coal mine at 9:20. You're late, my dad barked, folding his arms across his chest and scowling at us. Sourpuss pucker on his lips. We're sorry, sir, Sean apologized. I nodded in agreement. My dad's scowl softened slightly. My dad had always liked Sean, and for the same unexplainable reason, could never stay mad at him. Like it was a second son. I guess because I was his friend, that he considered him one. Well, I'll let it go this time, but next time you're late, you're fired. Are we clear? My dad growled. Yes, sir, Sean and I said together. Who would fire his own son? How could he go home to that? We stood there waiting to see if our boss had anything else to say. So one location he was my father, the other he was my boss. I guess it was a matter of respect. To teach. What are you waiting for? Get to work, my dad screamed. We scrambled to grab our picks and miner hats. We took the rickety elevator down the mine shaft. The lights from my hats danced and bounced. We set off for different parts of the mine. Even though I was his son, my dad didn't give me any of the special treatment, which was the way I liked it, actually. I didn't need anyone teasing me and calling me daddy's little boy, or seeming like I didn't earn the job. I just wanted to blend in like everyone else. But the more I tried, the more I figured it was worthless. Dad made me work till lunch, but then I was starving. Everyone was covered with coal dust and coughing from working in the mine. It took me a while to find Sean because everybody looked the same. Yellow hat and dirt spattered face, like kissed with dust. Soon it was time to get back to work. I quickly crammed the rest of my lunch in my mouth and slunk back to the mine. Not even caring if I tasted dust. I still wanted to talk to Sean, but it was kind of hard to talk when the air you were trying to breathe is laden with coal dust. I worked really hard the rest of the afternoon to earn my keep. Finally, it was time to go home. Dad had stayed behind to draw a plan for where we were going to dig tomorrow. I walked home with Sean, tired but satisfied. Dad hadn't come home yet when I went to bed. On Monday, I went to school and was only going to work from 3 to 6 p.m. When I got to the mine at 3:15, everyone was standing outside the mine talking in low, tense voices. There was an ambulance there, too. I knew something was terribly wrong. 2 paramedics were carrying a stretcher with a boy on it. Chills ran down my spine. He was as tall as Sean. Can't be, I thought. I went to find my dad to ask what was going on. I felt a strong hand grip my shoulder. I turned to find my dad staring solemnly at me. His eyes were full of fear and certainty. Something I had never seen in my dad before. Or at least he'd never shown it to me. We always show people how we're feeling. If there had been any doubt in my mind before, it vanished as I gazed at my dad's pale, sad face. Dad, what's going on? I asked, my voice cracking. Sean and several other workers were digging when the tunnel collapsed, burying them. My dad said, slowly weighing each word, as if testing their worth. It took a few seconds for what Dad had said to sink in. Then, like a bolt of lightning, it hit me. Sean could die. My breath froze in my chest. My whole body went numb. My world had become crashing down on me in a heap of rubble. Never before had it occurred to me that Sean could get hurt mining. That I could. Why he over me? Faced with the concept that Sean could be paralyzed, brain damaged, or worse, everything that had been so important to me before, like impressing my dad and having perfect attendance at school, seemed so trivial. As if reading my mind, and my dad added, many of them will probably die. God, please don't let Sean die, I prayed. Amen to that. Hope none of us die, my dad murmured. I walked to the hospital to visit Sean and the other workers. Sean lay half conscious in a hospital bed. He tried to wave, but it seemed too much effort. His wave was more of a hand flop. Like the other workers, Sean was on a breathing machine. The only miners who were not on breathing machines were the dead ones. I stared numbly. About 10 doctors and nurses tried to revive a man in miner's outfit whose heart had stopped. They tried in vain for about 2 minutes before one of them moaned, "We've lost him." The other doctors and nurses shook their heads and sadly and pulled the sheet over his head. They solemnly wheeled him out of the hospital bed, out of the room. I looked at Sean, my best friend since preschool, and wondered if he would be next. Don't be like that, I scolded myself. No way is Sean going to die, don't be dumb. I walked up to Sean's hospital bed. Hey man, how you doing? Fine, came the muffled reply, a few moments of silence. Dad's really worried about you. He had to stay at the mine to talk with the police to explain what happened. Stupid pigs, Sean said, trying to make himself heard over the breathing machines. You're telling me, I laughed. Without humor. Dryly. Later, my dad came to visit Sean and the other miners. He acted so cheerful and optimistic. He gave the miners hope. If only false until it was real. Only Sean and I saw us past this cheerful act to clean through. I stayed with Sean until visiting hours were over. At 7 p.m. and a kind of hard-looking nurse poked her head in the room. Visiting hours are over. Come back tomorrow at 7 a.m., she chirped. Can we stay for half an hour, please? I begged. No, visiting hours are from 7 in the morning till 7 at night. No exceptions. Your friend needs his rest. Now out we go. The nurse said, shooing my dad and I out, but nicely enough. We waved to Sean and walked out to the truck. My dad started it, and we pulled out of the parking lot in silence. We turned on the highway. As I was boredly staring out the window, out of the corner of my eye, I saw my dad repeatedly glancing at me with an anxious look on his face. I let this continue for about another minute, and then before I apologized to my dad before I analyzed my dad's actions. Dad, is there something you want to say? Is there something wrong? I asked tearfully, tearing my dad away from the endless sea of trees. Dad squirmed in the seat. I waited for him to answer. Yes, He stammered, his eyes meeting mine. The truck swerved in the opposite lane in the path of an oncoming car. Both vehicles slammed on their brakes as I gripped my seat and braced for impact, but it never came. It was a narrow miss, though. Made me wonder what went through Sean's head. My dad got out of the car, the truck probably uttering obscenities. The driver of the other car got out of it screaming probably obscenities as well. He stormed over my dad and screamed at him, jabbing his index finger on my dad's chest. My dad apologized over and over. Finally, the stranger got back into his car and sped off. Dad walked back to the truck, plopped in the driver's seat, and sighed heavily. I was still badly shaken by our near date with death. If Sean was dinner, I was dessert. My hands were still clenched in their fists around the seat cover, and I was shaking like a leaf. It's okay, Dave. Nobody was hurt. My dad said gently. Relax. Slowly, I calmed down and was able to stop shaking. We drove for about a few minutes, and then without warning, Dad pulled over. He put the truck in park, turned to face me, and put his hand on my shoulders. David, I want you to know how much you mean to me. I know sometimes I yell at you for not getting good enough grades, or sometimes I'm really hard on you, but I just want to raise you the best I can. Dad said quickly. Thanks, Dad. I said slowly, a little caught off guard by my dad's sudden display of affection. My father wasn't the kind of person who openly shows affection. But in his own way, he does, you know? Like one pat on the shoulder when he walks by. Seeing Sean struggle for life must have shook my dad to the core, or he wouldn't have been so determined to tell me I meant something to him. At least in the time he had to tell me. It might have gotten conscious off his chest. He started the truck and began to drive again. It was at that moment that my dad had moments of weakness. Just like everyone else, unabashed. He'd always act like nothing ever bothered him until now. I guess he wanted to let me know that it was okay to be vulnerable. It was recognizable. It was relatable. That people were quicker to help if I were quick to admit it. I studied the man who had always been my hero. His eyes were full of fear and his face was chalk white, then ghost white. That face would always remain etched in my mind until the end of time. I never seemed scared before. I think he'd always waiting for the day that I would, beyond his control. He always his emotion. He had always presented himself as an unshakable rock, probably so I could be confident. But seeing an opportunity to give me back my dad for all the things he had given to me, I reached out and touched his arm, thankful that admitting a mistake was just as strong. "Dad," I whispered, like he grunted to show he was listening. "Sean's gonna be alright, so don't worry. He's a tough kid. He'll bounce back in no time flat," I said reassuringly. I could swear that I saw some of the fear leave my dad's eyes, but it was instantly replaced by guilt. "It's not your fault the tunnel collapsed on Sean," I added. "I shouldn't have even let that boy stay at the mine instead of going to school." My dad growled to himself. "Please don't beat yourself up, Dad. You couldn't have known the tunnel was going to collapse while Sean was there. You're not to blame at all," I insisted. "It is my fault. It's my job as the boss to keep the workers safe, especially the youngest ones." He snapped his eyes dangerously. He was getting irritable and knew I should just keep quiet, but I felt the need to say one more thing. I gulped before speaking. "I don't blame you, neither does Sean," I said softly. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. There were circumstances for opportunity, and there were circumstances for just mistakes. And I know he knew it could have been either of us. That settled the silence between us. Finally, my dad spoke. "Thanks, Dave. That makes me feel a lot better." "I'm glad to hear that," I grinned. Dad smiled weakly. We drove the rest of the way home in silence. As soon as we pulled in the driveway, Mom came to greet us, and at our heels was my 3-year-old sister, Sammy, and our puppy, Ginger. "Daddy, David, where were you? I missed you," Sammy chirped, leaping into Dad's arms. "Now, not now, Angel. Dad's tired," groaned Dad, handing my squirming sister to me. "Big bro," she squealed, throwing her arms around my neck. "You'll play with me, right?" she asked innocently, her big blue eyes full of hope. "Of course," I said. "Yay," she screeched, jumping out of my arms. She grabbed me by the hand and started running into the house with me. She dragged me up to her room. I stood in the doorway as she rummaged in her toy box for something to play with. She emerged with 2 of her favorite baby dolls, and she eagerly held out one of the baby dolls for me to take. An image shuddered through my mind of Sean's head on the baby doll with one eye missing and tattered. "I don't want to play with baby dolls. Can't we play with something else?" "I want to play with baby dolls. I wanna. And you said you would play with me. You said. She whined, typical, stomping up and down. I cringed knowing it was coming. "Dave, please humor your little sister. Your father's trying to sleep," my mother called from the room she and my father shared. "Fine," I grumbled, snatching the doll out of her hand, despite my fantasy there. "Hooray," cheered Sammy, bouncing up and down. "I'll be the mommy and you can be the daddy." "Great," I said sarcastically. Half an hour later, Mom came in and helped Sammy get ready for bed. I was out of that room so fast I could swear I left a dust cloud the size of Texas. As I laid in bed, I thought about all that had happened today. I prayed for Sean to get better and blessed everyone I could think of including all the nurses and doctors in the hospital taking care of all the people who were sick or injured. That night I had a nightmare that Sammy died while I was playing with her. And she was on the other baby doll's head. I shut up in bed, drenched in a cold sweat. I checked the clock on my nightstand. It was 2:15 a.m. I groaned and flopped back on my pillow like a rag doll. I tried to get back to sleep, but the image of my sweet sister keeling over haunted my thoughts and chased any hope of sleep away. Around 4 a.m. I got tired of just laying in my bed, so I got up and went into Sammy's room. I kneeled next to her bed and watched her tiny chest rise and fall as she breathed. See, I told myself, she's fine, stop worrying. I guess Sean galvanized me. I stayed by her bed for what felt like forever. When I finally went back to my room, it was 5:09. Ginger was sitting in the doorway. She began to whine. What, nobody let you out? I sighed. She began to jump up and down in a frenzy. I tiptoed down the steps to the front door. I grabbed my coat and opened the door a little. Ginger squeezed out of the door and ran down the steps. She slowly paced the yard for about 5 minutes, and as she paced, I stood on the porch with nothing on but a pair of boxers and a coat. Come on, Ginge, hurry up, I moaned, pulling my collar up to cover my neck more. She did her business and zipped up the porch. I walked into the house and was surprised to see Sammy standing on the landing. Bro, what you doing? Asked Sammy sleepily. Taking Ginger out. What are you doing up? I asked. I had a bad dream. It was scary, she said softly. Really, really scary, she added, as if I wouldn't understand how horrible it was unless she added really twice. I wondered if she saw me in the same way in that dream. Why don't you tell me about it? I suggested, sitting beside her. She climbed in my lap and began her story. We were all in bed asleep when a big monster grabbed me. I screamed for you, Mommy and Daddy, to help me, but nobody came. The monster made of great coal stuff said all these horrible things. He said that you guys didn't love me anymore and didn't want me. She sobbed. Don't you believe anything that monster said? Monsters feed off fear and innocence. If you stop being afraid of them, they have no control over you. But what if I need you and you're not around? What will I do then, bro? Bro? I'll always be here for you, I promised. Promise? I promise, I said softly. Little did I know at the time how important these two little words would become. Come on, let's get you to bed, I suggested. Sammy clambered out of my lap. I took her by the hand and we climbed up the stairs together. I tucked her into bed. Can you tell me a story, Burbo? She requested. All right, but you have to go straight to sleep. Okay, she grinned snugly down under her covers. Oh, once upon a time, they would have to live after. No. Once upon a time, there were two kids. They lived in a magical land where animals and humans could talk to one another. Whenever they needed or wanted something, it was there. They were very happy. The kids played away days and dreams away nights. For years and years, they lived in peace, undisturbed by the outside world, unaware that one even existed. Until one day, their peaceful world was shattered by the arrival of two adults. How loudly they walked, crushing whatever was in their path. The children cried out as they crushed their flower friends under their massive boots. You apologize to the fathers right now for hurting them, the girl demanded, her hand on her hips. One of them men laughed loudly and mockingly. Don't you children know children should be seen, not heard? He barked, pushing her out of the way. Isaac, be nice, the other man requested. He helped the girl to her feet. This man was much younger than the other. Are you hurt? He asked, brushing her off. I'm fine. Good, he sighed. He pushed his light brown hair out of his stormy gray eyes. Isaac growled impatiently. Come on, I want you to get to exploring this place, he snapped, jerking his thumb over his shoulder. The boy frowned at the rude man calling his home this place. So superficial. The man with his gray eyes didn't move or make any sign that he heard his partner. Cole, come on. The girl's fine now, let's go, barked Isaac. I heard you the first time until you so rudely interrupted me. I was thinking about what we should do with these kids, Cole said softly. Don't worry about that, they won't be a problem. Let's take them with us just in case, suggested Cole. Whatever, but they're your responsibility, snapped Isaac, grabbing the boy by the arm and roughly shoving him towards Cole. That Isaac man is so mean, interrupted Sammy, frowning. Up until now, Sammy had refrained from interrupting because she was so interested in a story about kidnapping. Before this kidnapped. I know, I sighed. Why is he so mean to the kids? They didn't do anything to him, inquired Sammy. Because he's a mean person. Why? Because he just is. No use explaining it. People just are. Or they won't admit it. I answered. Sammy paused to think about this for a few moments. I was about to continue the story when she spoke up again. Bro, why did God meet mean people? She asked, her eyes wide and full of eagerness. Her eyes confessed the belief that I knew it all. Her question was an innocent one, but one I wasn't sure how to answer. I don't think any God makes mean people. I think people turn mean. Why? Because bad things happen to them and they forget what it's like to be happy. They remember how to hate and be mean because it's a stronger feeling. Why don't the angels remind them? I think they try, but the person won't listen. Or admit they need help. I answered, brushing her hair out of her eyes. Why don't they want to be happy? I don't know. I guess they figured it won't be worth it. I sighed. Sammy looked shocked. But you know everything, bro. I wish, I said, trying not to laugh. It's okay if we don't know everything. I still love you. Sammy said quietly. Thank you, Sammy. I love you too. How much? She teased. I spread my hands about a foot apart. This much. Well, I love you this much. She spread her arms about 2 feet. This was a game we played. I love you this much. I stretched, spreading my arms out as far as I could. Me too, Sammy giggled. She yawned wildly, her eyes half closed. I patted her head on the head and retucked the covers around her. Night-night, Sammy, I whispered. Night-night, Burbo. She yawned. I sat by her bed till she fell asleep, and I went back to my room. I checked my alarm clock. 5:15. Another 45 minutes, my mother will be getting up. Or coming to get me up. I decided it would be useless to try to go to sleep, so I took my Sherlock Holmes book off my nightstand and read that till my mom came to get me. I'm sure with all consciousness, my dad would probably figure the next time he woke me to go to the mine, it might be the day of our death. So, it was an honor to know. Davy, time to get up for school, Mom called up the stairs. Yawning wildly, I snapped the book closed. Oh. Give this hound of Baskervilles a bone, why don't you? I thought. Ginger came barreling into my room. She leapt off my bed and proceeded to lick the skin off my face, basically, with the force of it at least. "No, Ginge, down," I ordered, shoving her off me. She jumped down to the floor and stared at me as I tried to wipe all the slobber off my face. "Stupid mutt. Quite passionate," I muttered. Ginger whined impatiently. I stood up and scooped Ginger into my arms after all. She began to squirm happily, her light brown ears flopping. I descended the stairs with Ginger squirming in my arms. When I got to the kitchen, I set Ginger on the floor. Mama made eggs and bacon for breakfast. Little joke there. Ginger sat under the table waiting for me to share my breakfast with her. When Mom turned her back, I quickly dropped Ginger a piece of bacon. The bacon never hit the floor. Ginger snapped the bacon right out of the air. I wonder which impact was quicker, that or Sean. After breakfast, I ran up the stairs to brush my teeth and hair. I rummaged through my drawers for a decent shirt and pants. I threw on a pair of socks and shoes. I crammed all my school things into my book bag and went downstairs. "Mom, leaving for school," I called. "You have a coat on?" "Mom, it's not that cold out," I whined. "It's supposed to rain today. Get a coat on," I ordered Mom. You never know when it could just be in the middle of it and rain. Fine, I stormed into the coat closet for a jacket. I grabbed my light gray jacket and ran down the door before Mom could check to see what jacket I had picked. I was halfway to Sean's house before I remembered that Sean was in the hospital. This only worsened my mood. I slunk to school with a dark cloud over my head like Charlie Brown. All day I had to think about was Sean's condition. When he'd be back to school or not. After school, I used a payphone to call Mom and asked if I could walk to the hospital to visit Sean. "All right, but I need you home by 6 p.m. Agreed?" My mother said. All right, I agreed. I hung the phone up and started a long walk to the hospital. On the way, a 1923 Mustang pulled up beside me. "Hey kid, need a lift?" the young woman asked. "No thank you, miss." "You quite sure I'll be happy to give you a ride?" "Quite sure. It's not that far to where I'm going, but thank you for the kind offer, though," I said. "All right, then. Have a pleasant walk." "Goodbye." "Well, goodbye and have a pleasant drive," I said, waving as she drove off. A curious horn, shaped like a horse, on the tailgate. Ten minutes later, I was regretting not taking a ride from the lady. I was eager to see Sean, and my feet were starting to hurt. I wonder what kind of universe was in that car anyway. What kind of mood? What kind of vibe? Maybe I'll see her later. Finally, I got to the hospital. I walked past the check-in desk to Sean's hospital room. Sean waved when I walked in. "Hey, buddy, how you feeling?" I asked. Sean shrugged. About 20 minutes later, Sean's family walked in. Sean's mother ran over to the bed sobbing. "My poor baby, my oldest baby," she sobbed. Sean's younger siblings started poking and prodding on the wires Sean had sticking out his body until I stopped them. "Does it hurt?" one of them asked. Sean nodded. "Oh, poor brother," they chimed in union. Just then, Sean's 19-year-old brother Tommy walked in. "Hey, little brother, how you feeling?" he asked. Sean shrugged his shoulders as if to say, "At least it's not traction." "They treating you good here?" inquired Tommy. Sean nodded. Good, glad to hear it. Hey Sean, is the food here any worse than Mom's steamed cabbage? One of the younger children asked. Sean vigorously nodded. Sean put his hands to his throat and pretended to gag. That made us all laugh. Even Sean's mom was laughing through her tears. Laughter was the best medicine for the people waiting for someone else to get better. At 5:15, I left to walk home. Before I left, Sean's mom gave me a goodbye hug and wished me a safe walk home. I got home at 6 o'clock right on the dot. My father was sitting in the living room watching Three Stooges while my mom set the table. Dear, Benny called for you a few minutes ago. He wanted to know if there was any more math homework. Why don't you call him back before you sit down to eat? Said Mom without looking up. I called Benny and told him what homework was. Our meal was eaten in silence. At first, Sammy chattered about her day, but feeling the tension, she stopped short. After dinner, I watched TV until it was time for bed. I said my prayers before I fell asleep. No less intense, no more unnecessary than the last day. I slept fitfully, waking up several times during the night. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, Sammy came into my room. Sammy put her small, round face close to mine. Bro, she whispered, poking me in the side of the head. I groaned, cracking up one eye. What is it, Sammy? I groaned. I had that dream again, she whispered, as if it were a secret. Again? I moaned. She nodded. I already promised I would already be here for you. What more do you want? Make the monster go away, she whined. Only you can do that, I sighed. How do I do that, Burbo? Show the monster you aren't afraid to fight back. I paused. Or you could dream of an angel to fight the monster for you to, but angels can only protest non-violently. Sammy thought about this. Will he hurt my friends like he hurt Sean? I felt the same chill as I did when I first saw him in the hospital, barely clinging to the strain of life. Almost hearing that whine of life support going in my head. I made myself answer, no, I will make sure your friends are fine. I'll make sure he doesn't realize that they're vulnerable. The last thing I wanted would be my sister suffering grief as I was. Stifling to show it, but couldn't help it sometimes, I clutched her in my lap again. I gazed out my window and saw lots of snowflakes falling what would usually be a cozier winter night. As in, glad you're not out there, but warm to look at. I whispered to Sammy, angels will help comfort us because we will listen. Sammy nodded. And if they're not angels yet, they will be. The snow was endless. As if the cold permeated from outside the tunnel and reached outside. There was no wind at all. It wasn't there to save Sean in a mine accident. I was lucky not to have been hurt. And wondered if it was that silent, just like after a snowfall covers everything, with no echo after it fell. Just remember, the one thing the monster cannot stop is my protection over you. Even a vampire can't come inside unless he's invited. What if he keeps coming back and causes more accidents? Do we fight as much as we can? Yes, I rustled my hair. Until he gives up. Until he doesn't know what to do next. I asked what made Sammy believe her nightmares caused Sean's harm. Because Sean will be okay if they can be stopped first. There's really nothing I could have done to prevent what happened. I'm afraid your nightmares reflect your fear for my safety. You said not to be afraid. It's okay to be afraid sometimes for the sake of recovery. I think I understand. Sammy looked out on the window behind us. I hope Sean isn't cold, Sam told me slowly. I knew what she meant. Obviously, Sam wasn't standing in the road. There would be a huge problem. Every day, my compulsively compassionate worry for Sammy's safety grew. I become afraid that I'd wake up during the night and look at her sleeping, wondering if she was still breathing, and we would be to see another morning like Sean, coughing or not. Even coughing was noise. And eventually, you make music to one's ears. Use your imagination and we can defeat even their greatest fears. You can always outdo it. Isn't that what you're doing? She asked. I'm trying my best. We should always try our best at everything, especially when we aren't good at it yet. That's right, Sammy. Now pretend that monster is a dragon. Your imagination is forever standing cast when you dream. That the monster is the wolf against the third pig or something. My actual worst fear of Sam's protection came from the idea that Sean died, and Sam became much more paranoid than I. I'd yet to tell Sammy that coping with some intense emotions of grief take a lot of energy and time to become inevitable. I'd also had a hunch that tough things to explain were what Sammy was going to learn by herself. That I was only able to explain after someone goes through it themselves. It would help if Sean got better quickly and I'd feel better, so she'd have thus learned a moral, I guess. I sent her to bed after that. I kept snowing away all night. I made sure I cherished every single day I had with my loved ones, because one accident that occurred to one friend tends to bring family closer together. The problems would just be covered like footprints in snow. I'm not sure if I believe in any God that creates sinful situations as a price for values of family and friends. Was it a sin if he didn't know it was a sin? Did Jesus die for nothing if you don't sin? Those are questions I was afraid to ask in church. Especially in confession. I figured it makes sense why my dad changed himself because of Sean. I was off the day after I spoke to Sam again about her nightmare problems. Good for me, because since I needed to catch up on some sleep, at my age, I need it to grow. As if sleeping doesn't stunt your growth. An example of how my father changed is that Sean's incident pulled a metaphorical string to tighten our relationship. When I wanted to go out and play, he'd want to watch over Sammy and I. It makes sense that he'd be more secure toward us on a day slippery sidewalk on an icy February day when all the cul-de-sac kids gathered. Even they would have no superstition, so my dad could see that no one hurt from a fall, and phone their parents if they did. Everyone in the neighborhood always had fun when they put their troubles aside to make snow angels and snowmen named Frosty. I made a mental note to visit Sean that night. I hoped that within as short as a month he could join the rest of us yet again. All of us who played outside hung out with their friends who would introduce us to their friends and make more friends. I normally hung out with a slightly older guy named Dorian. We swapped stories about our weekends and reflecting on the last time we played in the snow and why it snowed a lot. Dorian was in another school district, but we were still buds. Better than a girlfriend in another school district. Occasionally he'd show me his collection of comic books or his 2 pet pythons. Dorian knew I was coping about Sean, so he'd like to play so I could have a friend like him. It's good to have an older friend. Anyone should have at least 20 more friends, so there's always a substitute who's just great. He'd tell me such things. Dorian's parents who worked out in the town's mall shop. Kind of a blast of the past there. Once in a while when we hang out, he bribed his mother to give us free or discounted milkshakes. If it was free, I'd offer to do an extra chore for my mother to make up for it. Since his mother was also great, I felt mine deserved an extra helping here and there as a kind gesture. The adults who had no children often went to the restaurants to talk, then went home for the rest of the day. I understood people in their town, and they were still loyal enough to watch over their coworkers as kids if necessary. It's good to have at least one place in the town where everyone feels timeless. And yet, that's where most of the memories grow. They were just as helpful, and helpfulness is just really what helps us grow as we are and were. Those are good things you don't forget about. But the bad things kind of wedge themselves into memory. Uninvitingly. It was rewarding to grow up in a grateful town. Give and always give back. When and how was not to be told. Even in a crystal ball. It's difficult to find that kind of sincerity in some places, probably due to the lack of events to do so, or time to do it. But why do some places need that? Why can't everywhere be like where I gave and was given? You don't expect it. You just give. Otherwise, it's business. To this day, every town, far and near, is still built on different beliefs that's established by people. Some of those beliefs were probably started by gossiping troublemakers who thus brought a sad fate upon the town when it was not taught proper morals that denounced their beliefs. The next generation could always make up for the last one. If there were a reputation that needed fixing. I often told Dorian at the malt shop how at home I could not always hide my feelings around Sammy. I did not want to make any little sister, of all people, even more confused by complex grief and frustration, especially from somebody who she looked up to, who turned out not to be who she thought I was. Sammy keeps asking me questions. I'm not sure how to answer them simply. I don't know. I don't want to frighten her into some state of paranoia that prevents her from working in an oppressive environment like mine. They could just be gone in an instant, without time to even process it. Sammy never has to work down there if she chooses not to, Dave. Yeah, but it's a generation kind of thing. My family and a few of our friends had worked down there a long time and continue to. One accident won't stop that. It happens. Even if your lungs are caked with dust. It seems ridiculous, really. Within time, Sean will be better and be behind you. And you'll appreciate his presence even more. Sammy will know things never stay bad. Some of these things are behind what a child her age can even fathom. And she reminded her not to feed Ginger a bar of chocolate, Dorian warned. And she knows that. Now I'm worried that what could happen if I get a simple splinter with my lip using chopsticks. You don't blame the country for that. We all fight our own wars.